Welcome, everyone, to the first of its kind, a resume clinic designed specifically for e-discovery project managers from your friends here at True Staffing Partners. My name is Jared Coseglia. I'm the CEO and founder of True Staffing Partners. I am joined here by our Senior Vice President of Recruitment and Account Management, Jess Barre. Just say hello to everyone that has joined us here today and introduce yourself for those of you who don't know Jess.
Hey, everybody. I'm Jess Barre. I'm based in Atlanta. I'm the SVP of Recruitment. And I am excited for us to impart a little knowledge today about what hiring managers are looking for, some common pitfalls to take. A lot of this will be about taking a resume from a 7 or 8 to a 10.
Or in some instances, from a 2 to a 10.
Sure, absolutely.
Where you are in your evolution of resume, or from a 0 to a 10.
Absolutely.
Look, part of this is also helping people not have to start with a blank piece of paper. And so a lot of what we're going to give you today will give you all that you need to go, okay, this is exactly what I know I need to do. We were hoping to be joined today by our dear friend and colleague in arms, Annette Habib, who had a little bit of an accident with the deer last night, and we want her to recover quickly. She's fine. But if you work with Annette, you know Annette, and most of you probably do because she's been with the company for, I think, 13 years now, 12 years. She's amazing. We love her. We miss her. We're sad she can't be with us today, and we hope she gets better quickly. So with that said, Jess, before we break down into exactly what to do your resume, let's talk about how hiring managers view resumes so that we can frame for everybody some of the myths and facts about how to approach a resume for a hiring manager in e-discovery. Jess?
Yeah. So specific to e-discovery, there are some common misconceptions. Number one, hiring managers only read the first 3/4 of the first page of the resume and then sort of glance at the rest. That's a fact. So everything that you want your reader to take away, be very punchy on the front end of your resume. That's very high priority. Piggybacking on that is the second one. The statistic is a little sobering, I know. 7 to 15 seconds is the average amount of time an employer spends looking at a prospective employee's resume. At first blush, that just sounds like a terrible thing to hear. However, it's a very useful piece of knowledge to have when working on your resume, because that means you need to maximize readability. And so you need to be able to use those 7 to 15 seconds wisely to draw your reader in to make them want to spend more time on your resume. Always include a cover letter. That's a big myth. Include a cover letter if it is asked for specifically, which plenty of positions do because they want to, see your writing style and things like that. However, I would say in the vast majority of cases, if it is not asked for, you do not need to include it. They're starting to go the way of the dodo a little bit.
Well, and I'll also say this, Jess, it could be a trap, right? People send a cover letter. It's an extra piece of content. Has that content been proofread appropriately? You get a little typo in your cover letter and your resume is crystalline and perfect. And now you've kind of self-sabotaged yourself. So it's sort of that, like, if they haven't asked for it, do I really need it? And what is it going to do for me that my resume doesn't cover? And
correct. When asked for a cover letter, it should be data that is not easily gleaned from your resume and something meaningful that sets you apart. Number 4, resume should be no longer than 1 page. That is a myth. Unless you're Warren Buffett, don't go past, 2 full pages. But it's certainly fine to go beyond 1 page. There's absolutely no problem with that. Oh, and one thing, I see a question in the chat. If you have questions throughout the webinar, please drop them in the Q&A section. And anything that Jared and I don't cover during the content, we'll go ahead and make sure that we address at the end. So don't worry about cutting really good real estate to get your resume to 1 page. And finally, using attention-grabbing fonts, charts, colors will enhance the appeal of your resume. That's also a myth. A straightforward, readable resume is what garners the most attention. In particular, with so many organizations leveraging AI, The bots have a harder time reading graphics, reading charts, reading pictures, things like that. So the more straightforward and readable your resume is, the better you're going to fare.
All right. I agree with all of this. I think this is really good. I think for number 4, I would say for project managers, 2 pages is fine. 3 pages is going to start to feel long, but no one should have a resume that's more than 3 pages. Nobody's going to read it, and people are going to question whether you know how to self-edit. All
Agreed.
right. Let's go through our top 10, and we're going to cover this sort of one at a time, but we're going to give you all the top 10 tips for putting together your Ediscovery project management resume all at once so you can see where we're going. So the first of which is summary versus objective. Actually, we're not going to do that, are we? We're going to go through one at a time. Summary versus objective. So Jess, what's the difference between the two, and why is one good and one not good?
Sure. So when you think about the top of someone's resume, when you have an objective at the top, if you're passing out a resume, your objective is to get a job. We all know that. That's why you're applying for something. So that's sort of understood and not a valuable use of your real estate. And certainly not the way you want to start out, because it's information we all have. A summary, on the other hand, is a punchy intro that pulls your reader in. It's telling me what you're going to tell me. It's the preface it's the trailer to an excellent movie. Right? It's what makes someone want to go further and look at the whole thing. So you want them to dive deeper. This should be short and punchy. 3 sentences, very max 5. The things that you want to highlight: what is my potential impact to the company? Why do you want me? And in a summary, you want to speak to the stakeholders and the people that you are trying to influence. Think about who your reader is. And then I would say another piece of guidance on a summary: be thoughtful about the specific position that you are applying for. If it is not an executive level position, don't over position yourself in your summary, right? Because it's just as dangerous to come across as overqualified as it is to come across as underqualified. So that trailer, that movie trailer, is going to be really valuable in setting you apart.
I'll add a few bits of color to that, because I think all that's right, Jess. I would also add to that, in that 3 to 5 sentence intro, there are a couple metrics that you want to speak to, a few of which Jess already mentioned. Additionally, what is your subject matter expertise, right? It has to be spelled out there, right? Like, I am an e-discovery project manager that specializes in or has tremendous experience with. It also needs to speak to the people you're influencing in there, meaning I work directly with the C-suite, or I work directly with litigation partners at AmLaw 100 firms and Fortune 100 companies, right? Getting that detail in there. We're going to talk about more detail in a second. But the summary is so important that it touches these things. And then what I think you always want to end that summary with, Jess, is what is your personal value proposition, right?
Correct.
You start
Absolutely.
with what the impact on the company is going to be, right? Then you end with, this is my value proposition. That's where you talk about some of those things that are a little less quantifiable, right? For example, I lead with a culture of kindness. I win friends easily throughout the organization. And you don't want it to be in first person, but some of these kinds of character traits, extreme attention to detail, adept at learning new technology that enters the marketplace. Some of these things that are value propositions that are maybe not as easy to quantify as the casework you've done or how you've supported a matter or a business. That's the place to go there and talk about that, to give the reader a sense of tone and feeling about the kind of character and integrity and culture of the person that they're now going to read the skill set of. Yeah.
And frankly, a summary is a great way for your reader to say, how would you describe yourself? Because the rest of the content of a resume is much more quantitative. And so that summary is, how are you positioning yourself and how do you view yourself? Which I think is really, really valuable.
All right, let's get into number 2, the clear chronology. And we'll go to resume here. Katie, our amazing Katie player, is behind the scenes providing us with visual stimulation along the way for today's webinar. She's amazing. Let's look at the dates of employment here. We see this all the time. There's a couple of things here that aren't working out in the resume. The first of which is they don't have the months next to all the dates, right? You have to do it to the month. They'll need that for the background check. That lack of detail creates a mystery around the exit of your employment and when it occurred and if there was overlap. Anything you do to create mystery with your resume is not good. Resumes are not about creating mystery. They're about providing information so that there's less mystery on the interview. And now you're getting layers into the onion deeper when you're interviewing, as opposed to trying to pick apart what's happening on a resume. So dates of employment to the month. The other thing that's interesting here is if you look at where this Jane Doe was at Legal Tech Innovations, she actually was at this employer from 2010 all the way through March of 2015. And if we know they only look at your resume for 7 to 15 seconds, this resume might feel jumpy because the reader didn't notice that it's actually the same employer. And they actually got promoted. And what has become now a potential knock on their candidacy is actually a really good thing. Employers want to hire people who get promoted. So we'll show you how to fix that in just a second. We'll show you what it looks like when we combine that and how we recommend people combine their chronologies to demonstrate both the full length of their tenure with an employer and that sense of getting promoted. And this is especially important for Ediscovery project managers because a lot of you have been at companies that have been acquired. I talked to a candidate a few days ago that's been through 3 acquisitions over the last 10 years, right? When I looked at their resume, it looked like they had 3 different jobs, but it's been the same job. It's just been through acquisitions. You have to spell that out on a resume so that there is a narrative around the chronology that helps give context to the positive and does not inappropriately accentuate a false negative.
One of the things that I would suggest, Jared, for folks, because there are so many on this call who we know have been part of acquisitions, just from a formatting perspective, the way that I would handle that is employer name, and then next to it on the same line in a parenthetical, FKA, old company, comma, old company, like the acquired companies.
And I think,
and then you'd have your total date range there.
Katie, can we go to our demonstrative good resume? And you'll see here what we've done. Let's just scroll down to that section. You see here what we've done in terms of tech legal innovators. You've got the date range there. So when they glance at the date range looking for tenure, 5 years, right? As opposed to 3 years, 2 years. And then you've got the subset of those dates with the actual job you had during those dates and the substance of what you did in that job separated from the substance of what you did in the other job with those separate date ranges. That's how an Ediscovery resume should read. Jess, anything else on chronology before I kick it back to you for our next top 10?
No, I think we covered it all.
Let's talk about size and scope and what we mean when we say add size and scope to your resume, because this is probably the easiest thing for most people to embellish their resume with.
Yeah, absolutely. Size and scope ultimately goes to your credibility. So when we're talking about size and scope, instead of saying, and Katie, if you want to pull up the before resume, that would be great. And I just saw someone in the chat asking if we can zoom in on that resume a little bit, please. So, this person is saying, if you look at under tech legal associates, supported cases of many sizes. Okay. If you're adding in size and scope, thank you, Katie. That is going to be able to say, I support 200 attorneys. There are 500 end users. The number of offices you're supporting, where are those offices geographically? Is it across the country? Is it across the world? Being able to say all of that, yeah, supported cases of many sizes. If we go to our good resume, our after, Katie, then we'll see, supported 100 plus simultaneous cases, ranging in size from 100 gigs to 5 terabytes, right? Things like that. That is going to lend your credibility and help your reader understand the scale on which you are comfortable and accustomed to working. All of that makes for a more meaningful contribution to your resume. And that is really going to set you apart from the pack.
It also becomes the conversation starters on the interview, right? So instead
Absolutely.
of trying to figure out how many cases and how big they are and how many attorneys and what's the biggest data set that you've taken and used technology assisted review or advanced analytics or continuous active learning to reduce that data set, all of those kinds of metrics when it comes to size and scope now allow the interviewer, when they're looking at the resume, to say, hey, let's go deeper here, or to recalibrate expectations. Meaning, for example, they may say, hey, listen, you're spending 25% of your time on collections right now, 20% on processing, 20%. Over here, you're never going to touch collections, right? I just want to make that clear, right? You'll probably give that up to come and take this job. Are you okay with that? Right? And now you're getting into conversations about setting expectations for success and what the job responsibilities will entail, as opposed to an interviewer wondering what you do and how you do it and how big you do it or not. Jess, any other comments on size and scope? This is a really important one.
It is a really significant one. I think we've covered it well. Why don't you talk about the funneling of skills?
This is the most important one for me, because we see people get disqualified for jobs because the order in which they have organized the content under the chronology of their resume does not position them appropriately. So Katie, let's go to the next slide. And there's two primary ways, and you kind of have to do them together, in our opinion. So, sometimes you're sacrificing one for the other to make it sort of a narrative that works. But as an e-discovery project manager, the things at the top of your chronology, so PM at wherever, should be the strategic things. What are the strategic initiatives that you're involved in with cases? Are you advising and consulting on things? If you're managing people, who are you managing? How many are you managing? Talk about the size and scope of the people you're managing, your managerial style, the impact your management has had on staff growth, elevation, retention. Any metrics you can provide there are also very useful. Consultative, now you're getting into your subject matter expertise. What are you an expert at? What is the knowledge base that people lean on you? Then operational, how are you actually creating function and executing on that function? Then your technical skills, tactical and administrative, right? If you're talking about the paperwork you do at the top of your resume, that's what people are going to think you spend the most amount of your time doing. And that's going to be what people think you enjoy doing the most. The
Correct.
other way to in parallel structure your resume is in order of EDRM. So unless you're interviewing for a trial support position, that should be at the bottom of the chronology of the job that you're inheriting. If you are producing documents for trial or setting up exhibits or having to run hot seat in trial, that should be at the bottom, because that's the order of things. If you're dealing with pre-discovery matters like data mapping or legal hold order or collection and preservation, litigation preparedness, defense readiness, all of that should lean to the top of your chronology, and then getting into the life cycle of the case. The processing, the hosting, I think that's supposed to be hosting, not posting. Hosting, production, review, trial. These are like two funnels working together to get you where you want to be. Anything to add here, Jess?
No, but I would say definitely while you're funneling those skills, especially on the substantive side, on the EDRM side, tailor it also for the type of role that you are interviewing for. If there are huge indicators in the job description about what is most relevant, organize accordingly.
Yeah, I'll give a great example of that. It's, we had somebody who wanted an e-discovery project manager who really understood things much further left, like helping interpret subpoena requests, helping with TAR protocol negotiations with their attorneys, and getting into some pretty sophisticated but the top of the resume is talking about all the advanced review management that they've done so far right, that because it's at the top, like that's what they're going to think their main focus is. And that's not what they're hiring for, even though they do that a lot. You've got to frame it for the reader. Great point. Number 5.
Absolutely.
And we're going to pick up steam here, Jess, because we've only got about 10 more minutes. Action verbs.
Let's talk about action verbs. You want to conjure the image of you doing the job in the mind of the reader. What are you doing, not just observing? We'll whip through this. Action verbs showcase where you have had ownership over something. Ownership could be over a workflow, over a piece of tech, over a project, over a team, right? It could be any of those things. So words like evangelize, mobilize, strategize, inspire, lead, cultivate, harness, right? Those are all words that demonstrate how what you do is impacting others, impacting the project, impacting the organization. Action verbs are just that. It is a call to action. Use strong verbs. Don't be afraid of them.
Great. Man, well said. Milestones. This one's really important too. And it's going to connect with another thing we'll talk about later. But it's important that you're not just talking about the things that you're expected to do in a job on your resume. You want to talk about the things that you've achieved or the things that you've been part of your team achieving. So what are those very specific milestones that say, hey, we got from point A to point B. I started here, ended here, so that there's a narrative around something that's specific to you. Right? We could all be in a room and talk about relativity or talk about, 26F conference preparation, and we could all talk about it in theory. But the more your resume talks about know and theory and idea, and the less it talks about actual experience, less hypothetical, practical, historical, the more difficult it will be for somebody to know what you bring to the table and have experienced in order to offer you more.
Absolutely. Let's talk about proofreading for a moment. And this is a good one to pull up some of the before and after resume. So if we want to pull up the before, if Katie, could you scroll up to the top, please, on this before? Okay, so one of my personal pet peeves, because again, we're going back to readability, allowing your reader to glean a lot of information in a short amount of time. Having open prose in all caps is not readable. It slows the reader down. So dispense with that. With bullets, they should not have periods if they are not a complete sentence. Present and past tense accuracy and subject verb agreement. I know it sounds silly and it sounds like we're all going back to 9th grade English class, but your reader will pick up on those things. If not consciously, subconsciously, because it is so much more tight when you get all of these things correct. Another one that we see all the time that is unique to Ediscovery is using spell checking consistent with industry specific language and with industry specific tools. Jared's personal pet peeve is I connect. There's only one N in I connect.
Literally every single day I see a resume that spells I connect with 2 N's.
Daily.
Every day.
So make sure that you're looking through those type of things with a fine-tooth comb and do so carefully. Move edges. So another thing that I would say as far as proofreading goes is move your education down to the bottom. When you have such a short amount of time to convey information to your reader, what have you done for me lately is so much more important than when did you go to school and what did you major in. Another thing that will increase your readability and allow your reader to glean more information is using industry-specific acronyms. So, use capital EDRM because your eye's drawn to that and you quickly know what that is instead of, electronic discovery reference model, right? Spelled out. Not only does that tighten things up, but it also allows your reader to grab that faster. And then a couple odds and ends, be careful when you're using, if you leave the page right there, Katie, you want to look at where you're using to in a date range versus an N dash versus an M dash versus a dash. I would personally use an N dash and keep it consistent throughout. You want to avoid first person narrative as well. So for example, right here, what Katie has highlighted, I managed. We do not want to do that. And then finally, make sure you're incorporating as many terms of art as possible. Terms of art, talk about the language of Ediscovery, right? Use the common terms, use tool names, drop all of that into your resume because it lends credibility and sophistication.
And it's a great transition into number 8, which is relativity skills specificity. Relativity skills are still the number one thing that hiring managers are generally looking for when they're hiring e-discovery project managers. It's the state of the market. And so you need to talk about your relativity skills on the resume. I know what Annette would say if she were here is to talk about it and have that word on your resume if you're using it as much as possible. Katie, can we quickly go to the True Staffing Partners Relativity Skills Assessment? Just so you guys see, this is our website. You can go to it, click on Skills Assessments under eDiscovery. This will take you here. Click on Relativity Self-Assessment. This self-assessment is now required by 95% of our eDiscovery hiring managers to accompany a resume with a candidate when we submit them for jobs that require relativity skills. It was developed in concert with relativity. So all of this has been greenlit by the amazing Danielle Urban over in certifications over at Relativity in order to help give hiring managers a sense of your confidence around your relativity skills. This is a great place to go get that nomenclature that Jess is talking about that is industry specific, because these are the things hiring managers want to know about your relativity skill set. So if you're setting permissions and managing queues and administering a relativity instance, that should probably be on your resume and articulated as so. If you're heavily focused on running productions and running production sets and creating priv logs and imaging documents or OCRing documents and you're checking expert here, that should also be on your resume. Even if you're not being represented by True, it should be on your resume. And if you are being represented by True, the resume and the checklist should be mirrors of each other, not 100% the words, but enough that they are reflective, right? So that one doesn't bring up things that the other is completely missing, right? You talk about being great at analytics, but then your checklist doesn't demonstrate the same confidence, or vice versa. You're not very confident in analytics, and your checklist says you are, right? And it's nowhere on your resume. Make sure that they're aligned. And this is a great place for you to get inspired with language that is industry vernacular. Jess, this next one can be stated very simply. And Katie, we can go back to our top 10.
Yeah.
Number 9, state what you've done, not what you know. Tell us what that means.
So your resume, and this is probably my biggest takeaway for this whole webinar, my personal sticking point. Your resume should read like a list of accomplishments, not like a job description. Show me what you have accomplished. Show me what you've done, not just esoteric, theoretical, I know how to do this. An example would be, with that kind of specificity is I called a data set from, a petabyte to 500, terabytes using XYZ tool and XYZ workflow. That is something that you have accomplished, that you have completed, and that it is demonstrative of your knowledge base and your experience.
And it transitions into our final bit of guidance and advice, which is business impact. And this one I think is more challenging because it takes exactly what Jess said to the next level, which is, hey, I called this data set and I did all this amazing stuff with technology, but who cares? Well, here's who cared. And here's the impact it had for the customer or for the firm, right? And it can be institutional too. It doesn't have to be case specific. Helped bring a firm from an on-prem relativity model into a Rel 1 hybrid cloud model using multiple managed service providers in a direct relationship with relativity, using this size of their Azure server space and being able to reduce costs by X amount of money, which enabled the business to grow more because of our increased profitability, right? All those dots that take the impact you made on the technology or the case to the impact that you made on the customer, or the impact you make on the employer, or the impact you're making on other people, right? Hired 6 people over the course of 3 years who are all still with the organization, and mentored them to move from utilization at 30% to 110%, which now allowed for an evangelization of additional budget for headcount to continue to grow and scale the program, leading to greater profitability for the firm. I mean, you start saying things like that, people are going to understand that you understand what your impact is, other than doing the job that's on that job description. And I wish more job descriptions read more like the business impact they want people to have, but they don't. They don't, because they're looking to hire you for what you've done and what you know, but you've got to position yourself as not only that, but how you're really going to impact their business beyond what's just on the job description, because you are an experienced e-discovery project manager. Jess, that takes us to the hour. I think we could stick around for a few minutes to answer any questions anybody
Absolutely.
has. You can pop them in the Q&A. We had one question here from George asking if you've only got 7 to 15 seconds, what do you include that's punchy? I think we kind of covered that, but George, what Jess sort of said that I'll also answer with is, I used to tell candidates, I still say it sometimes, you hold your resume out in front of your face and kind of squint your eyes and tell me what pops at you. And if nothing pops at you, that's probably a problem, right? You want some visual structure of, oh, my eye's going to go there because I see EDRM, as Jess said in all caps. And what comes after that is really substantive about my strategic ability to manage the entire life cycle of a case, from subpoena interpretation all the way to production and trial resolution, right? And I want to draw the eye there so that they read that, because that's exactly what this job is about. That's what we mean by punchy. George.
Absolutely. I have another question that was in the chat. Jared, how do you feel about folks adding attachments to resumes, like a past case or, like a list of their speaking engagements, things like that? What are your thoughts there?
I mean, again, I think it's not unless it's asked for, be thoughtful about how it will give you advantage. For example, I've had some candidates that add attachments of literally a laundry list of, if I gave you a list of all the speaking engagements that I've had over the last 25 years, it would literally be a novel. So nobody wants to know that. It's more, what are the speaking engagements that speak to the job you're interviewing for? And I'd recommend giving a little section of your resume that's committed to that towards the bottom, to draw attention to the things that you want to be conversation topics on the interview, because that's what they're really there for. And if you hand somebody a stack of all your speaking engagements and ask them to interpret it and figure out what you find interesting, you're asking too much of anybody that would interview you. So again, it's about, where do you want them to focus? What do you want them to ask you on an interview? And that would be how I would approach specifically speaking engagements or published articles, because the likelihood that someone's going to read something you wrote before an interview is pretty slim. They'll probably glance at that too, if at all.
If at all. Yeah, agreed.
Do we have other questions? Sorry, I wasn't looking in the chat. Were there any other questions?
Yeah, so I have one comment. Someone mentioned to use Grammarly or ChatGPT to review your resume or cover letter for grammar. I don't think that's bad advice. However, keep in mind that these tools are not fluent in Ediscovery. So going back to that advice regarding tool-specific spell check, things like that, just be cognizant of that if you're using AI.
Yes, someone actually asked a great question in the Q&A, which is, are old programs in your skill set list good or bad to keep on your resume? Opticon, Mobius, Filecracker. I remember Mobius and Filecracker. I remember hunting for people who had Mobius. Look, I would say this. We were making the demonstrative, after resume in prep for this, and one of the bullets that we had pulled from an old resume had the word Unicode compliance in it, and we took it out. So I don't know if that answers your question. I think you've got to be careful of two things. One, is anyone going to find value in you having worked with those tools, or are they going to see that you worked with these old tools and haven't worked with the ones that have sort of replaced them since? And then it sort of draws attention to a skill set that you no longer maintain. And then what value does it really have? So in that instance, I'd probably take it off the resume. But if you're a hardcore, forensic or encryption decoder, and you're using things like this that are evolved now, yeah, they could be on a list of things. I don't think it would harm you. But again, you never want to put something on there that is going to draw attention to the things that are going to create mystery or create doubt or create,
or that you don't want to talk about
or that you don't
on
want to talk
interview.
about. Exactly.
If it is on your resume, assume it is fair game to be asked about on an interview.
It's a great point. All right, any final questions? Any tips for someone trying to get into e-discovery with technical skills and a paralegal or other professional experience, but not in Spherix and Relativity? Yes, I'm going to give you the best advice that you'll ever get in your life. Go spend your money, register for the classes, register to go take a certification, and get it done. Because it's not the knowledge that they're actually hiring for, it's the self-initiative. If you want to stand out from all the other IT people who call us all day, every day, and want to break into this business, but have not shown any self-investment in learning it, right? Go get your ACEDs. You know, and you don't even actually have them before you start interviewing, because what you're going to put at the top of your resume is currently pursuing my ACED certification, registered to take the certification class on this month and this year. Same thing with anything in the relativity ecosystem. Because now, if I'm your agent, I'm going to my customers and I'm saying, they're invested in themselves. This is the kind of person that you can invest in because they're willing to put their own investment in themselves. And
Absolutely.
they've taken steps to move towards breaking into the industry. They're not expecting you, the employer, to take all the risks.
Bingo. Awesome.
Guys,
This
thank
has
you
been
so
so
much for
great.
joining us. Jess, you're amazing. Katie, behind the scenes, you're amazing. Guys, if you haven't downloaded our 2024 Ediscovery Jobs Report, it is the most comprehensive analysis of what's happening in the Ediscovery job market today. And it really does take you from post-pandemic all the way to the present. You can find information about remote versus hybrid in-office analysis, law firm salary averages versus vendors, how fast jobs go on and off the market, and a lot more. You can download it here. You can find it on our website. If you're not joining us every month for our Eye on ESI webinars, you can join us and register here. We join Mike Quadraro and Maribel Rivera at ACEDS, and we give you updated metrics on all the trends that we're seeing in the marketplace. If you liked this clinic and would like to see more like it, tell us. We're thinking about doing more. Some for Ediscovery attorney focus, or data analyst focus, or legal analytics, or whatever. We want to hear what you thought of this. This is the first time we've done something like this. We hope you find it valuable, and we will follow up with all of you with a link so that you can share the recording of this if you think you have a friend that would find it valuable as well. Jess, I'll give you the final word.
We appreciate you being here with us. We're hoping to do more of this. And please don't hesitate to reach out to Jared, myself, or anyone on the True team with any questions. Thanks, everyone.
Great summer, guys.